Welcome to this live broadcast, and we are sorry about having to throw it together at the last minute. I am here in Stephanie Klick's district in one of the public libraries that is in the region that is represented by a certain person in the Texas state legislature named Stephanie Klick. She is someone who came from nursing. She has an education in Christian schools. But she's a nurse by profession, and she has represented this district. It's a very conservative district in Texas since 2012, if I understand correctly. Now, she is the chair of a committee in the Texas House of Representatives called the Public Health Affairs Committee, and there are several important bills that right now are under her direction. The most important one is one of several bills that are collectively called the SaveJames bills, which we're going to hear about from Jeff Younger here. The reason why we're calling this together is because we have heard all of this alarm online in the conservative world about Republican legislators and Republican leaders not standing up for important principles. We saw that Governor Noem in South Dakota sank a bill that would have stopped transgender sports, and Governor Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas tried to stop a bill similar to the one that we're trying to pass here in Texas. And there's other areas as well that are covered by this pro-family area of concern. Texas is generally viewed as this deep red state, but there are a lot of games that can be played, and that's what we're trying to prevent. We only have 6 months every 2 years to pass bills. There's 2 houses, so any bill has to get through committee and then to the floor for a vote in one house, and then gets referred to the other chamber, and then very often has to go through committee in the other chamber, and then has to be brought to the floor for a vote. At every step along the way, people who are the chairs of committees can do all kinds of things if they are under pressure to sink the bills, okay? And so Jeff Younger will talk a little bit about that now. Tell us about the SaveJames bills and what is at stake, and particularly what people who live in Stephanie Klick's district can do about it.
Well, let me tell you what led up to these bills. Without my consent, my ex-wife transitioned my son to a girl before his 3rd birthday. She taught him she taught him this horrible lie that he had a female brain in a male body, and made him uncomfortable in himself, and began to really pressure him and punish him if he didn't act like a girl. She enrolled him in school as a girl without my consent. She changed his name to a girl's name without my consent. And the medical records from our court activities and our court verdict show that she planned to put my son on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones at 8 years old. Well, he's now 8 years old. And I've been fighting to get legislation to stop this since he was 3. The chemical castration drugs that they planned to put him on at 8 would have permanently sterilized him and would have damaged his skeleton, so that he's an avid boxer and football player, and he would never be able to play those sports again for the rest of his life. Further, one of the unique aspects of the SaveJames case is that my son only presents as a girl with his mom. With me and everyone else, he presents as a boy. So he doesn't present consistently at all. He doesn't present insistently, and he's not consistent. So he doesn't meet the 3 criteria needed to get a diagnosis for gender dysphoria. So this boy has 2 choices. This boy could be raised by his mom into a lifetime and long-term prospects that have a suicide rate over 20 times the national average, or he could be raised normally as a boy and have a normal outcome. Unfortunately, the institutions in this state, the psychologists, the schools, CPS, I've endured 7 CPS investigations, the government agencies in the Texas Attorney General's office, they don't know what to do with these cases. The courts have just allowed my ex-wife to transition my son even after I have a verdict. So I have two rulings by courts that my son is a male by sex, a boy by gender, and his name is James. And yet the schools are today, right now, teaching my son that he's a girl. How did this happen? Well, I guess the big thing is that if you just leave children alone and you just watch and be cautious with them and raise them and socialize them normally as boys, 80 to 95%, depending on what studies you consult, will just resolve by the time puberty's finished. And these boys come to identify with their biological sex. And it's really no different than tomboys that we used to call girls like this tomboys. And by the time they got through puberty, they're usually some of the most beautiful women and the most eligible women for marriage. These things just resolve if we leave them alone. That's exactly why the psychologists block puberty. They block the cure for gender dysphoria, because puberty is the cure. So I've been struggling with this. I've been ordered by the court to not teach my son traditional teachings on sexuality and gender in my Christian religion. I'm under a gag order right now, which prohibits me from talking about any LGBT issue, whether my son's a boy or a girl, anything like that. And it's very clear that in Texas, we need legislative guidance. The courts need legislative guidance, the schools and the agencies all need legislative guidance. And I just want to give you some outrageous examples that led legislators in this state to even propose these bills. So, again, despite the fact that I have 2 court rulings that my son's a boy, the public school in Capel continues to teach my son that he's a girl. To this level, when I bring my son to school as a boy, the teacher gives him a dress to wear. They do it to that level. And I can't get them to stop. I've been through the grievance process. The only thing I'm left with now is doing a lawsuit against a government agency, which is, a forlorn hope. They just won't stop doing it. The Texas family courts have no idea what to do either. In my case, they're just letting my ex-wife relitigate this every single year. I have to go to court and prove that my son's a boy every single year. I've spent over $1 million on this, and there are a lot of fathers who just can't do that kind of thing, and they're going to lose their kids to this movement. Parents are being illegally gagged by courts. Courts don't want to deal with this issue, so they're just telling parents that you're going to be held in contempt of court if you talk about whether your son's a boy or if you talk about LGBT issues. That's illegal. Those are unconstitutional orders, and we need to stop that too. The other thing is that the child support issue, which nobody ever talks about. So right now, under current Texas statutes, I am required to pay for psychological therapy where they teach my son as a girl. And it's going to be a cold day in hell before I do that. I am not going to take any actions that harm my son, and that would harm my son. But right now in the state of Texas, that's considered medical child support, and if I don't pay that, they'll put me in jail for that. So there's a whole number of issues, I haven't even covered them all, that this has created in Texas. The courts, the schools, the agencies need these laws. So 2 laws were proposed. One by Stephen Toth, which was a very simple bill. It simply classifies these chemical castration and the surgical mutilation of children and transgender surgeries. It just classifies those as child abuse. While it still leaves open medical interventions for children who may have precocious puberty, children who have special intersex problems, or medical deformities that they need plastic surgery to help with. It has all of those good exemptions, but it says that if you're trying to change a child's identity away from their biological sex, if that's the aim of your medical interventions, that's child abuse. Then we have Matt Krause's bill, HB 1399, which simply outlaws the procedures. It doesn't reference child abuse at all. It simply outlaws the procedures for the purpose of changing gender and removes liability protection from doctors, allowing them to be sued for those procedures, and that would effectively prevent them from getting medical insurance for those procedures. So both of those are good bills. I like both of them, and I actually think both of them should be passed. I think doctors should have their liability protections removed, and I think it's child abuse. The problem we've had is that, one, we have Dade Phelan as Speaker of the House, who has Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest lobbying group, the most powerful lobbying group for the LGBT agenda. They give him a 100% approval rating. He's a Republican with a 100% approval rating from the largest gay and transgender lobbying group in America. He's the Speaker of the House, and he has made very clear that he doesn't want these bills to see the light of day, and he doesn't want to vote on the House floor. The committee chair, a woman, Representative Click, has delayed bringing these bills to her committee, and in my opinion was attempting to never give them a hearing. We have a hearing scheduled for next week on Wednesday. However, it's not clear that even after the hearing she's going to allow them to be voted on in her committee. So we need people to contact Click from her district and say, look, we thought you were a conservative. We thought that you would protect the children of Texas. We thought you were a nurse who cared about ending barbaric medical practices against children. And lest you think that this is some unusual thing, that we're getting involved in medical decision making, let me give you 2 examples from Texas law that shows that's not true. First of all, in the early 1990s, the Democrats outlawed electroshock therapy on minors. Now, electroshock therapy has come back. These witch doctor psychologists are starting to do it again on minors in California. We won't be seeing that in Texas because the Democrats, when they control the legislature, entered into the patient-doctor relationship and said, no, this is a barbaric practice, and even though you may consent to do this with a psychologist, you can't do that in Texas because it's barbarism, and we're not going to let you do that to kids here. Texas also unanimously passed the female genital mutilation bill, in which they said that you cannot mutilate the genitals of girls. You cannot surgically mutilate them. You can't use anything that would cause harm to the genitals of little girls. And this was a result of certain religious practices and certain cultural practices that had made their way to the United States. So in my opinion, it's already illegal to do any of these procedures on girls in the state of Texas. And any doctor who has done so should suffer that 20-year prison penalty that Texas provides for violating the female genital mutilation laws. I just think we need to extend protections to boys too. And I think that if we're going to not allow the free exercise of religion to allow a parent to mutilate the genitals of a girl, we can't let identity medicine and identity politics be a reason to allow parents to mutilate their children's gender. So we need you to talk to Click and tell her these things, and tell her we thought you were conservative and you would protect Texas children just like you protected them for female genital mutilation. Why aren't you protecting them from identity medicine and identity politics and transgender mutilation?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.